Before you judge this man by his face, before you laugh at his clothes, before you think he is weak, remember this. This poor man will change the way you think forever. A city that forgot the soul Athens. 470 B.C., a city of marble and gold, tall temples, beautiful statues, powerful men. Athens was rich. Athens was proud. Athens was famous. But something was wrong. People talked about money. They talked about power. They talked about pleasure. They did not talk about the soul. They did not ask, what is good? What is right? What kind of life is worth living? And in this shining city, a poor boy was born. An unimpressive beginning. His name was Socrates. His father was a stonemason. He worked with his hands. He built walls and temples. His mother was a midwife. She helped people give birth. No kings, no wealth, no power, just a simple family. And yet even as a child, Socrates was different. Other boys admired heroes and warriors. Socrates admired questions. While others played games, he sat alone, thinking. A boy who asked dangerous questions. He asked questions that made people uncomfortable. What is justice? What is truth? What does it mean to live well? He did not want fame. He did not want money. He wanted understanding. Athens was full of loud voices, but Socrates spoke quietly, and that made him dangerous. The man, everyone laughed. And as he grew older, people laughed at him. He was not handsome. He wore the same old clothes every day. He walked barefoot. He ate very little. People said his face looked strange, wide eyes, big lips, flat nose. But Socrates did not care. He once said, "He who is not content with what he has will never be content with more." While others chased pleasure, Socrates chased truth. The questions that shook Athens. Socrates did not give speeches. He asked questions, simple questions, dangerous questions. He would stop a rich man in the street and ask, "Do you think you are wise?" The man would say yes. Then Socrates would smile and ask another question, and another, and another. Soon the man realized something painful. He did not know as much as he thought. Socrates did not attack people. He held up a mirror, the method that changed the world. This way of teaching became famous. Today we call it the Socratic method. Instead of giving answers, he led people to discover the truth themselves. Not shouting, not forcing, just thinking. Even today, this method is used in schools, courts, and universities all over the world. And it started on the streets of Athens. A teacher. Without a classroom, Socrates never wrote a book. He believed truth should be alive, not locked inside words. His classroom was everywhere, the market, the temples, the streets. He spoke to everyone, farmers, soldiers, politicians, teenagers. To Socrates, every mind mattered. The students who changed history. Young men began to follow him. They did not learn how to get rich. They learned how to live. One of them was Plato. Another was Xenophon. They watched how Socrates lived, how he feared nothing, how he desired nothing. They followed not just a teacher, but a man who lived his truth. But there was a problem. Powerful men were watching, and they were afraid, because a man who teaches people to think is more dangerous than an army. In Part 2, we will see how Athens turned against its own conscience. and why Socrates became the enemy of the state. And this is where the real tragedy begins. He never raised a fist. He never raised his voice. But Athens was more afraid of his questions than of swords and armies, questions that burned like fire. Socrates was not violent. He did not shout. He did not insult. But his questions burned. They burned lies. They burned pride. They burned false power. Rich men felt exposed. Leaders felt small. Ordinary people began to think. And a city built on image and pride does not like mirrors. A broken city. By the time Socrates was in his 70s, Athens was no longer shining. The great city had fallen. After the Peloponnesian War, Athens was tired, poor, and afraid. The economy was weak. Politics were unstable. Trust was gone. Fear filled the streets. And when people are afraid, they don't look for truth. They look for someone to blame. The dangerous man who held no power, Socrates, was not a general. He was not a politician. He did not lead rebellions. He had no army, no followers with weapons, no plan to take control. And yet, he was seen as a threat. Why? Because Socrates questioned the foundation of Athens itself, its values, its justice, its idea of right and wrong, and that scared the system. The accusations. One day the decision was made. Socrates was charged with 2 crimes. First, corrupting the youth of Athens. Second, not believing in the gods of the city. Big words, heavy accusations, but what did they really mean? He is corrupting our children. Young people loved Socrates. They listened to him. They followed him. They learned to ask questions. They learned not to accept lies just because a powerful man said them. Imagine you are a politician who lies, and suddenly young people stop believing you. They start asking why. That is what terrified the leaders. So they said, "He is poisoning the minds of our youth." But Socrates never told them what to think. He taught them how to think. He was not corrupting them. He was waking them up. He does not believe in our gods. Athens believed in many gods. Zeus, Athena, Apollo. Temples stood everywhere. Sacrifices were made every day. Belief in the gods meant loyalty to the city. Socrates never attacked religion, but he questioned blind belief. He spoke of a higher moral force, an inner voice, a guide inside the soul. He called it his daimonion. People didn't understand it, and what people don't understand, they fear. So they said, "He does not believe in our gods." But this was not about faith. It was about control. The trial begins. In 399 BC, Socrates stood before the court. This was no small trial. 501 citizens were chosen as jurors. No lawyers, no judge. Just Socrates and the crowd. He would defend himself. Old, calm, unafraid. This was not just a trial of a man. It was a trial of ideas. The crowd was loud. The tension was real. And Socrates was about to speak. He could beg. He could cry. He could apologize. But he would do something far more dangerous. In Part 3, you will hear the words that shocked the court, angered the crowd, and sealed his fate. Because Socrates would choose truth over life. And Athens would never be the same again. One sentence, one courtroom, one old man, and the most powerful people in Athens felt afraid. Philosophy versus power. Hundreds of people gathered, friends, students, Enemies. The city was buzzing, and there stood Socrates, almost 70 years old, barefoot, wearing simple clothes, no gold, no weapons, only words. Everyone expected the same thing: tears, begging, apologies. But Socrates did none of that. A calm voice, in a loud room. He stood straight, he looked at the jurors, and he said, "I am not here to beg for my life. I am here to speak the truth." The room fell silent. He told them clearly, "If you think I will stop asking questions just to live longer, you are wrong." He did not fear death. He feared living without truth. The sentence that echoed through time. Then he said the words that shook the courtroom: "The unexamined life is not worth living." He meant this: if you never think, never question, never reflect, you are not truly alive. You are only breathing. "I do this," he said, "not for myself, but for the soul of this city. I am your gadfly. I keep you awake." But Athens did not want to wake up. Guilty. The jurors voted. 501 citizens, and by a small margin. Socrates was found guilty. The crowd reacted. Some cheered, some stayed silent, some felt regret. But it was not over yet. A joke that sealed his fate. In Athens, a guilty man could suggest his punishment. Socrates could have chosen exile. He could have chosen silence. Instead, he smiled. "I deserve free meals for life," he said, like an Olympic champion. The court was shocked. Later he agreed to a fine. But the decision was already made. The final sentence: death. By poison. Hemlock. Some jurors immediately regretted their vote. But the law had spoken. Socrates was taken to prison, and Athens believed the problem was solved. Transition to Part 4. But they were wrong, because Socrates was about to teach his most powerful lesson, not with words, but with his death. They locked his body, but they could not lock his mind. A city that moved on Athens continued its life. Markets opened, people argued, artists carved stone, but in a small prison cell, a man waited to die, calm, silent, free, a teacher. Until the end, Socrates did not cry. He did not panic. He talked about the soul, about virtue, about death. His students came: Plato, Crito, Apollodorus. They were broken with grief. Socrates was not. The escape plan. One morning before sunrise, Crito whispered urgently, "The guards are paid. We can escape. Another city, another life, freedom." But Socrates said no. "If I run," he explained, "I destroy everything I taught. To break the law because it hurts me would make me unjust." To him, truth mattered more than life. The cup. At sunset, the guard entered. He carried a cup. Poison, hemlock. His hands were shaking. Socrates took the cup calmly. He drank it slowly, without fear, without anger. The final moments. His body grew cold. His friends cried. Socrates spoke his final words: "Do not forget to care for your soul." And then he was gone. The man who could not be killed. Athens believed it had silenced him. It failed. The men who condemned him were forgotten. Socrates became eternal, because ideas do not die. Truth does not die, and a man who teaches people to think can never be erased. This was the death of Socrates, but it was also his victory, because every time you question, every time you think deeply, every time you choose truth over comfort, Socrates lives again, the death that gave birth to immortality. He had one step to freedom, one open door, one chance to live, and he refused it. The question that changed. Everything, there are friends waiting. You can live in exile. Please come with me. Crito's voice trembled. Any other man would have run, but Socrates stayed calm. He looked at his friend and asked, "What matters more, Crito, living or living rightly?" Crito had no answer. Truth must be. Lived, Socrates spoke softly. If I escape, then my whole life becomes a lie. I taught that justice matters, that laws matter, that virtue matters. How can I break the laws now just because they hurt me? He knew what people would say. Even Socrates feared death. Even he did not believe his own words. He could not allow that, not because he wanted to die, but because truth must be lived, not just spoken. A conversation about death. On his final day, Socrates talked with his students, not about fear, not about pain, but about death. This moment lives on in Plato's dialogue, Phaedo. Socrates said something unexpected. Death is not the end. He explained, the body is temporary, the soul is eternal. A true philosopher prepares for death his entire life, not by dying, but by freeing the soul from greed, pleasure, and lies, peace where fear should be. His students cried. Socrates did not. You fear death, he said, because you think it is unknown. But is it not worse to live a life without truth? He even joked. If I meet Homer and Hesiod, he smiled, I will finally question them. Even on his last day, he was curious. The cup. As the sun fell, the guard returned. In his hands, the poison. Hemlock. The room collapsed into tears. Socrates gently said, My friends, be calm. He raised the cup. No shaking hands, no anger, no fear, only peace. He drank it slowly, every drop. His legs grew heavy. He lay down. Silence filled the room. Then he whispered to Crito, We owe a rooster to Asclepius. Do not forget to pay the debt. Asclepius was the god of healing. Socrates meant this. Death has healed me, not from sickness, but from the limits of the body. And then he was gone. A city that realized too late. Even the guards cried. Students broke down. Athens continued outside. But something had changed. The man they feared had died with more dignity than any king. Days passed, and guilt spread through the city. Some jurors whispered, We killed the wisest man. They understood too late. They had not killed a criminal. They had killed their conscience. One student, one promise. Among the broken hearts stood a young man, Plato. He had watched everything, and he felt responsibility. If I stay silent, he thought, the truth will die. So he made a promise. I will write everything. And he did. The voice that never died, Plato, wrote the dialogues. Not boring texts, but living conversations, philosophy as drama. And in them, Socrates lived again, walking the streets, questioning power, facing death. Through Plato's words, Socrates became immortal. The man who refused to beg one dialogue stands above the rest. Apology. Not, I'm sorry, but a defense. Here we hear his real voice, calm, brave, unbroken, and the words that still shake the world. The unexamined life is not worth living. They killed his body. They failed to kill his ideas. Every time you question power, every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you think deeply, Socrates lives. and the fire he lit will never go out.